Hello, this is JD Wisgo of Self-Taught Japanese, and this is the live streaming test, or should I say beta version, of Self-Taught's Japanese live streaming. Took a lot of setup to get all this stuff working, and it's pretty cool technology, all the streaming and such. So you have to excuse me if I have some glitches here and there. Can you guys hear me all right? If you can hear me, please say something in the chat, just so I know that the audio is working. Because I had an issue 2 or 3 hours when I tested. It was not quite working well. There was some issues with skipping and such. So let's see. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Burning Lemon. I appreciate it. That's great. Okay, so we'll get started. First of all, thanks to all you guys who've joined now, or all of you who are watching this in the future. I'll probably make this live. Or not live, online after the live. But of course, the live is really the best because you guys get to participate, which is really the best, the most interesting, most fun part of all this. So it's really cool to have you all. So just to give you an idea what this is, I think you probably have some idea, but just to clarify, and if you happen to be joining in, because I have some channel followers who may not have gotten my emails. So just to kind of talk about it. So basically, if you have seen, I had some YouTube videos before sort of analyzing translation, stuff like that. And it's a little bit like that in the sense that it's kind of off the cuff. And it's really like kind of just doing these things without a lot of preparation. But at the same time, in some cases I may I may prepare things in advance. So really, of course, the main point of all this is Japanese, right? We'll be talking about learning Japanese, grammar, vocabulary, kanji, writing, reading, listening, in some cases pronunciation. And then we could also do translation, like my my translation YouTube videos. We can do some of that stuff live, little selections here and there. But really, it's up to you guys and girls. It's up to you to kind of give me some content. So I think I mentioned before to some of you over email, but feel free to put in questions now or later. If you don't, that's okay too. I have some content I can just kind of start with to kind of get us warmed up. But it's really up to you guys because you're the viewers. So thanks again for joining. And let me just tab over and see. See, my son is putting in a lot of comments. Okay, that's great. So I got a question. First question. Yay. Thank you, Luke. So about this mask, which of course is the most dramatic thing you can see here. And right here, it's really hard to read the writing, but to just get some Japanese writing practice for difficult writing. This says Man Showman. And the very first of these characters, no, is like the one from no ryoku, which is ability, and sai no. And in this case, though, it's actually from a traditional type of theater called no, sometimes written in English as N-O-H. Maybe I'll write that down so you can see the actual kanji, because this is really hard to see. The second one is men, like face. And the third one, again, it's really hard to read. I'm not sure how good the quality is for all of you, but this is sho, which is small, and then men again. And this showman is kind of it's a special term. It's not really that common. And this is actually, it's a no mask. So no theater is really cool. It's actually hundreds of years old theater. And one of the translation projects I did involved some no stuff. So I'm not going to get too deep into it right now. But if somebody really wants, we could do maybe a special issue just about that and kind of get deep in that. But anyway, so it is not from Spirit Away, but yeah, there is some lag. And I apologize. I've been trying to tweak and adjust the lagging. So it should be pretty low, the delay. It should be about 5 seconds. Yeah, exactly. So I see someone chimed in here and said, it looks like the movie Spirited Away, since they used old-fashioned Japanese style. Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say something similar. So this is a really old mask. And even in modern popular culture, you'll see there'll be people using masks like this for some reason or another. Another example is, I forget the name because it's a different name. It's Hero 6. I forgot the name. It's Baymax is what it's called in Japanese. And then I forget the name of it. It's the Disney one. But anyway, one of the evil characters in that has and he has a mask, and it's actually for a different type of theater, but it's similar. So the point is, even in modern culture, in Japanese and even some other places that talk about Japanese culture. They'll use masks like this. So it's not the exact one from Spirit Away, but yeah, it's definitely these are used to influence a lot of modern stuff. So anyway, so good question. And by the way, one of the Baymax, yeah, that's right. Baymax, yeah. I forgot the name. It's big. Let me just look up the name of that. I forgot the name of that movie. It's Hero 6, something like Hero 6. Let me change it so you guys can see my screen. I'm still getting used to the switching. Yeah, this is the movie I was talking about, Big Hero 6. And we're kind of getting a little off topic, but that's okay. Really, anything goes for this stuff. So there's a bad guy in this movie, and this is a cool movie, by the way. I mean, it's in Japanese influenced. I don't think it's Japanese produced, but it is kind of cool. It's a fun movie, really. And this guy here, you can see he's using I forget the name of the theater, but it's a different type of theater. It's not really a null mask, but it's a different type. A kabuki, that's what it is. It's a kabuki mask, if I remember correctly. So it looks a little bit similar to this, but it's not the same. Anyway, so let's move on, but that's a cool topic. So I guess what I wanted to do, and one more thing I want to say before I get too deep into this, this is, it's sort of a sort of a beta. It's sort of a kind of like a experiment, right? We're trying it out, seeing how things are going to pan out. So what I want to do is make sure, you guys can send me as much feedback as possible. It can be in the chat. It can be, through my blog or an email or whatever. But really, anything from the video to the sound, it's really cool. Good point. Yeah, sorry about that, Regular Awesome. We just got a good comment about the Japanese mask. So I appreciate that. We're going to move on right now. So let's move on. So since I didn't get too many other questions besides the mask one. Oh, sorry. I did see a question here from what happens to be my son. How did you learn Japanese? Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the comment there. Nice stream. So this is really the biggest number one question of my Japanese stuff. And really the whole blog, the point of that is to talk about how I learned Japanese. So it's kind of hard to talk about it in a comprehensive way, but I do want to address it because it's, like I said, it's one of the most important parts of the entire blog. So let me switch it back to the big camera because I'm not going to show. So yeah, so just to talk about Joel's question, how did I learn Japanese? So, I mean, really there's a lot of different ways I learned. And for me, like one of the most important things was that I didn't really set any limits, right? I wasn't like, I'm only going to use this, that. I basically used everything I could think of. I mean, and I've written a few articles about this, but, for some of you who may not have seen my blog, I've done everything from, manga to, watching dramas, of course, newspapers, blogs, you can go on and on, pen pal, that thing, that type of things. It goes on pretty much anything I can think of. So anything I could get my hands on, and keep in mind, I started over 2 decades ago when there was, I think, no internet back then. So it was a lot harder and there was a lot less resources, but I would literally go to Barnes and Noble and I would memorize the books because either I had bought the book or I read the book, looked at it a little bit in the bookstore. So I would get almost every book, for especially grammar. So just to talk about that a little more, I mean, yeah, I studied a lot of different ways, but that may not help you too much because, where do you focus? So one thing I want to talk about briefly here, because it's really the cornerstone of a lot of my studying, is grammar. Because grammar is really, it's the cornerstone. It holds together everything, right? Listening, speaking, talking, even translating. All those things, you can't do any of those things, right, without proper grammar. And, if you're young or if you happen to be really linguistically skilled, right, you can definitely pick up grammar and you can learn to do it yourself. I mean, we all do it, right? That's one thing. Just for those of you learning a second language or a third or fourth, whatever, right? I mean, we all did it when we were kids. So it is something our brain is mostly wired to do. But as we get older, it becomes a little harder. So I would say there's, if you happen to be a teenager or something, you'll probably pick up stuff like grammar pretty quickly. But for most of us, it's really good to have grammar to kind of help us. It's almost like a crutch, right? Because eventually we'll learn how natives break grammar, right? They'll use things that are outside of the scope of grammar. But the grammar is really one of the most fundamental things. So anyway, what does that actually mean? For me, I bought literally every grammar book that I could think of, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and I would just read pretty much cover to cover, everything. And whenever I, was reading through a book, I got started with Murakami Haruki, which I'm sure pretty much all of you know because he's still, I think, the number one most popular author. And he's a cool author. I kind of got I wouldn't say jaded, but I'm not into him as much now. But I was appreciative of what he did for me because he got me really into the Japanese culture. So just giving an example, when I would go through one of his books, and like, yeah, they were really hard, right? I would spend literally like, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes on a page in the beginning. But whenever I got to a pattern, and I call it a grammar pattern, what I mean is like a structure, right? So for example, we'll get a little more into detail. So, shita hou ga ii, right? That is just a pattern. And if you read it, and you can try to guess the meaning, and you can try to go from context, but the more of those patterns you pick up, and that's a pattern I learned really early, so it comes really quick to my head, shita hou ga ii, and I think even when I'm speaking, I use that pattern a lot. And even that pattern, it's a little counterintuitive because you would think it's suru hou ga ii. I mean, in some cases you think, why is it the past tense, right? And that's one where you can look into a detailed example or a explanation, but it's good to just learn the pattern, right? You can say, well, it should be suru hou ga ii, or you can get detailed into that, but you just memorize the pattern, right? And there's so many things, suru to ii is another one, right? And this talking about those two patterns, right? They're totally different and they seem somewhat similar, right? I mean, shita hou ga ii is when you should do something, right? Of course, and by the way, I know that there'll be people of different language levels, so I'm going to try to stay, a little bit basic, intermediate, and I'll try to give explanations as much as possible, so I don't make any assumptions. So shita hou ga ii, and let me just switch to this. And I know we're slightly on a tangent, but that's kind of the way I work. So let me show you my screen, and we can definitely focus. Okay, apologies about that. Where's my main screen? Here it is. Okay, so I was stuck in the wrong window. So let me go back to this. And this is just an example of a grammar pattern. Sorry, I got the wrong browser there. Okay, so I think you should be able to see this now. Okay, so this is shita hou ga ii. And another thing, I will make the assumption that most of you guys and gals know hiragana and katakana, maybe a little kanji, and I'll definitely give kanji readings when they're relevant. But I'm not gonna use romaji for now. But if anybody has a request for me to use romaji, in other words, if you want me to write it like this, I can do that too. So just let me know. And I'm not looking at the comments constantly. I'm gonna switch back there every once in a while, so I can kind of get a feel for that and not distract myself too much. But let me switch there now just to see. Wow, a lot of comments. Okay, what made you want to teach people? Yeah, burning lemon. Good question. I'll get back to that. So. Oh, thanks, Jim. Okay, awesome. Getting a lot of comments. So anyway, continuing with this, we're slightly on a tangent, but we'll talk about this pattern just because, like I said, it's the way I work. I have a lot of detours, but I think they're for a good cause. So, shita hou ga ii, right? This is basically should do something, right? And the shita here comes from suru, right? Shita is past tense of suru, which is, suru is a generic verb. Again, I'm just going to kind of assume or not assume that you don't, not to make too many assumptions, right? Excuse me, I'm kind of stepping over myself. So suru, right? This is to do, and this is a generic verb, right? And this could be used with a lot of other verbs like benkyo suru, right? And I'm going to put the romaji here because of the kanji involved, in case you don't know. But benkyo suru. Anyway, so if you wanted to say, just showing this quick example, benkyo shita hou ga ii desu yo. So this is a grammar pattern, right? And it means you should do something, and it has a certain nuance to it, right? And it's a little aggressive. It isn't necessarily something you would want to use with a boss. I mean, you could. This is the polite form, keigo using des mas form. But and anyway, so this is a grammar pattern. So once you learn the shita hou ga ii, right, then you'll pick this up in reading, and it'll be really quick. And you can use it yourself. Of course, it's reading, writing, speaking, all that. And another one I just mentioned, just in case anybody was curious and like, what's that? All right, this is suru to ii, right? And this is the same suru, but now it's in the present tense, or a better term is non-past tense. I'll probably talk about tenses a little bit later, but we have suru to ii, right? And this is like a lighter version. This is like I'll just say mild. I'm just making sure it's showing my screen. It is mild suggestion to do something. So, and you can think of it as like, it would be nice to, right? So you could say something like, what's an example? Hon o kao to ii ne, right? It would be nice if you bought a book. Hon o kao to ii ne. And maybe, in some cases, it might make a better example is hon o kaeru. So kaidu has a lot of meanings, right? It can mean, and just to show here, the one I want to do is kaidu, which is the potential form of to buy, right? So hon o kairu to ino. So this would be, it's good if you could buy a book. So let's say like you only have a little bit of money or you don't have a lot of time to go to the store, but it would be nice if you could buy a book, right? But if I said hon o katta hou ga ii, right? It's a little stronger. At least that's the way I feel that phrase. So anyway, just to step back out of the tangent for a minute, these are basically all grammar, what I call grammar patterns. I don't know if there's a better word for that, or grammar structures, grammar patterns, but these are things that I really ate up. I would just go through and learn these one after a time. I mean, I would even just like read a grammar book, which maybe it's a little boring. But the other way is, like I said, if you're going through novels, Murakami Haruki or whoever you pick, you can just kind of go through it. And when you find a grammar pattern, you can actually stop, make a note, right? You don't have to necessarily stop every time, but you can circle it if you're the type of person who likes to write in books, and then come back to it later, right? So you can pick up these grammar patterns. So to me, it's important not just to get the vocabulary, right? But to also get the grammar patterns, because those are really the things that stick it all together. And of course, grammar itself, right? And what is grammar itself, right? It's the word order, right? You know, stuff like, you know, of course you have subject, the basic word order, right? And I could do a whole hour or two on this, right? But the basic word order, right? Just an example, what you probably, most of you know, is, you know, subject plus object plus verb, right? So it would be like boku wa ringo o taberu. Okay? And those are some, probably most of those kanji, but just in case, I'll just do romaji here. Boku wa ringo o taberu. Okay? So anyway, the point is, like, these are basic tenets, basic things about grammar, which kind of will really be super important. So I mean, if you're just starting, yeah, you learn word order, and then you learn particles. You know, I've actually wrote a book about particles, and I talk about, I would say like a huge percentage of my articles on Self-Taught Japanese are about particles. But in case you're not sure what I'm talking about, you know, it's wa, this is normally read ha, but in this case it's wa, de, ni, o, you know, all those things. They're little words. They're a little bit like prepositions, not exactly, but they, in some cases they're similar. So this is again, it's a fundamental part of the grammar, right? And then there's things like verb tenses, like I said, conjugation, and then other things. So these are all like grammar things. So again, this is all sort of an answer. Yeah. So let's take a pause now. I need to figure out how to work here with the comments and the speaking. So I'm gonna just read here. We got Burning Lemons question. I'll come back to a minute, and then we have somebody here who said something. So I'm gonna take this message from the chat and I'm gonna read it because it has some kanji, in case anybody wants to go. So this is a Japanese person joined my stream. Thank you for joining. And we have this here. So I'm going to just read this through. And there's some kanji that some of you guys may not know. It's a little bit advanced, but let's take it as a little bit of an exercise. And in case you looked at the comments. So what I'm going to do is also focus on the kanji. So because you may not know some of these kanji, right? Hon o. And we could even make a little translation exercise if anybody wants to. Hon o yomu. Again, I want to use just hiragana here. Yomu dake de wa. Okay, so just by reading books. Okay. Teichaku ritsu. Okay, this is yeah, and I actually know what this is now. Okay, teichaku. So teichaku is like sticking, right? Teichaku. So this is like sticking. And ritsu is a really common kanji, especially in mathematical context. It's like the percentage or the usually it's percentage, the amount, the frequency of something. Let's see. I just got a message. I'm trying to see. Oh, sorry. You know what? I realized. Thank you. I was typing in the wrong place. Sorry about that. Okay. There we go. Thank you. So the problem is I was typing in the wrong editor, and now I have this here. So I think you can all see this now. Great. Apologies. So this is the sentence that I wanted to go over. So, hon o yomu dake de wa teichaku ritsu. Okay, wa. Now this is 10% in English, but in Japanese you say 10%, right? It's not 10%, it's 10%. But, and you know, even natives, sometimes they'll, especially if they're bilingual, they'll kind of jump around and sometimes they'll insert English words in Japanese, and that's totally normal, right? But, which is dakedo, right? Shichou kaku. Right, so shichou is to listen. Now there's senses, right? The 5 senses. Shichou is the sense of listening, right? So shichou kaku. Actually, I would have to look that one up. Let me double check. I think that's the sense of seeing. Oh, shichou is okay. Shichou is basically seeing and listening to in this case. So it's actually the senses of kind of like listening, experiencing to something. Like to give an example, 視聴率 is like the percentage of people watching you, or like the viewage of your YouTube or whatever it is, right? So anyway, 視聴覚 is basically like actually engaging, actually in being engaged with something, right? So here we go. 定着率 20%. So again, this sentence here is pretty abbreviated, right? So we have 視聴覚を活用. 活用 means to kind of put into use. So this is like if you just use your listening and your visioning. So you're kind of passive. That's one way to look at this, right? 視聴覚, if you're just using your hearing and your visual senses, right? You get 20%. 定着率, which is, I'm not sure what the best translation for that offhand, but it's kind of like staying power or retention. That's the right word. You're getting a certain amount of retention, right? And then we have, because I was focusing on kanji here, 誰か, right? に教えると, right? And now there's this to, right? And I just got a message. 視聴覚 is visual and auditory senses. Thank you for that. So, because that's a word I actually don't use in my daily life, but it's good to learn. So, 誰かに教えると, and now we see this すると, and again, this, we talked about the 顔とすると. This is actually the same to form. Now, it's not するとい, but it is the same to. And this to here, since we were talking about grammar, is used as a conditional. So it's like an if, or when, that type of thing. And there's three fundamental conditionals, right? There's the すれば, right? And there's the すると, and then したら is the third one. I actually wrote an article on that a few years ago that a lot of people are apparently reading, because it's very complicated to pull them apart. So I'm not going to pull them apart now, but you just think of it as an if or when, right? So in other words, if you teach, right, 誰かに教えると, if you teach to somebody, 学習定着率, right? Again, we have a big word here. Let me just separate this one. 学習定着率. Again, we have a long word, but if we look at the pieces, right, it makes sense. 学習, you've probably seen before, right? This, and again, we're jumping around, but this is a good kanji to know, 学ぶ, right, which is to learn. It's also in 勉強, or no, it's not, sorry. I got that mixed up. 学ぶ is to learn. And this one here is 習う, which also means to learn. 学習定着. Oh, I made a mistake. Sorry about that. 学習定着. So, 習う and 学ぶ. And I'll just use this for now because it might be easier. 学ぶ. So, these are the first two kanji of this word. And this word by itself, it means the same thing, basically. And this is 学習. And this is kind of a little more formal, stiff way to say to learn. And here, notice it's a noun form. These 習う and 学ぶ are both verbs, like する, right? But this here is a noun form. Right, so you could say 学習する, or in this case, it's a compound word. So it's 学習定着率. So again, we talked about 定着, which is basically retention, it's keeping something. 率, which is basically the percentage of retention, learning retention. So I'm sure there's a formal word for that, but the bottom line is, if you just read a book, and basically, or you're just kind of involving your senses, you're not actually actively participating, you're likely to get, around 10% of retention, which means the stuff you learn is just going to go away, all right? Maybe you'll kind of a vague memory, or you'll completely forget it, but you'll forget it pretty quickly. And by the way, thanks to the person for giving this is a really good comment. But if you actually teach somebody, right? And this is, I'm going to get back to the question from Burning Lemon. I didn't really answer it fully, but if you teach somebody, you actually have a much higher retention, right? Because if you think about it, you're actively thinking, you're dynamically processing that information. You have to understand it. And like I've experienced the same thing even in martial arts. And I used to teach off and on, informally in college with math and stuff. So it's really cool because, it's fun. I like teaching. But anyway, so let's get back to Burning Lemon's question because I want to not forget about that. And we see Jim Miles saying, I've heard the term effortful study in contrast to the read a book, forget it. Okay, that's interesting. I like that. Effortful study. Yeah, that's putting in effort, doryoku, right? Or gambaru koto, right? And by the way, I see regular awesome. Thanks for the nice comment. So let's go back to Burning Lemon's question because I never really answered it. So what made you want to teach it to people? Okay, that's a great question. So, and I guess I'll put on the big camera. Doesn't matter. Nothing amazing to look at. But since I'm not using the screen now. So basically the history is I had a blog and it's still out there called Sweets Reporter. and I haven't written for it in several years. I don't know, a long time. But sweetsreporter.com, and I happen to like sweets. By the way, in Japanese, you call that an amato, right? And let me get back to my correct browser window, right? Since we're kind of amato, right? Amato. Okay, and this is like sweet. It's kind of like a sweet tooth, right? There's probably other words for that, but this is one way. So I'm amato, so I like sweets. So basically, I was always eating sweets, and I like to try new things. I was picky about my ice cream and the sugar levels and all this natural stuff. Sorry, someone's just telling me I can't see. Apologies for that. Thank you, arigatou gozaimasu. So yeah, I'm still getting used to the Windows switching. Yeah, I apologize for that. So what I wanted to do is show you what I was just typing. So yeah, I was typing amato, which is sweet tooth. And this is basically somebody who's into sweets. So that's what I was saying. I was a sweet tooth. So what I would do is I would like sweets. Anyway, we're getting pretty far off topic, so I want to return to the main point. The point is, at a certain time, and I was still studying Japanese at this time, and I was like, the sweet tooth stuff, the sweet report, it's fun, and I liked writing too. So I was like, I could start writing about Japanese, but I really hesitated because I'm the type of person that I don't like to, in Japanese you say kenkyo, which is humble. I guess I'll write that one down too. So maybe we can all learn some new, the kanji is a little more advanced, kenkyo. There's other ways to say humble, but that's the most common way I use kenkyo. So I don't like people who, and here's another word, eraso ni, right? Eraso ni. And that's basically when somebody's like, yeah, I know what's up. It's people who they talk like they know everything, but they're not really fluent. People, and I just saw a video just earlier today, somebody who was talking about English grammar, and they were like, yeah, this is how it is. And I was like, no, that's totally wrong. So, erasoni is like when you're like acting like, erai, one of the definitions of that is like a certain high level, like they're up there. So, erasoni is like, yeah, I know Japanese. So anyway, I was very hesitant to make a blog about Japanese because I knew, and you can look, my first post is still there. I think it's 7 or 8 years ago. And I really hesitated, but I tried it out and I was very clear that, I'm not 100% fluent. I'm still learning. But even at that point, I had studied for over 10 years, right? So yeah, I think around 10 years. So I had a lot to tell, right? And I wasn't fluent, but I wanted to talk about stuff. And like I said, I had spent pretty much years thinking about grammar, getting deep into grammar. And yeah, my pronunciation, it's not 100% perfect. My intonation, my pitches need a little bit of work, definitely. But my grammar, I feel pretty solid, and that's why I wrote a lot of those out. Anyway, so the long answer is, I enjoyed it, and the more I wrote, it's very satisfying, right? You get people, and I got a lot of comments, and I was very, how should I say, studious. One word for that is jimichi. That is not the exact same thing as studious, but jimichi, and this is when you're very, what's the word? Let me look that one up. I think steadfast. Let's see, steady or serious. Okay, so jimichi is basically when you're doing something like in a persistent, but in a positive sense. You're doing it every day. You're definitely doing it, right? 毎日必ず日本語を勉強する, right? You're very I can't think of a good English word for it, but you're doing it consistently in a steady fashion, like the turtle, right? If you want to use the turtle rabbit thing, you're doing it in a steady fashion, right? Slow and steady wins the race. So that's how I was studying. I was basically every day I was doing it, and then I got into the blogging where I would do it at least once a week, and it was really fun. And it's even now, I'm almost at 1,000 articles. So anyway, let me go back and see. I see a comment from somebody that ne is mostly feminine, which is a good point. So if we go back to just to show the example sentence I was talking about, jumping around, but we'll eventually get to. So here we go. Hon o kaeru to ii ne. So and again, this is ne as a particle, right? So here it has a sense of friendliness, but also a little bit of feminine aspect to it, as the native speaker said. And basically, it also has a sense of acknowledging the other person, right? You're not just stating. If you were like a robot, right? For example, you probably wouldn't say ne. You would say like hon o kaeru to ii desu or something like that, right? You wouldn't say ne because ne it's a sense of acknowledging the other person, like as another human, that they're actually listening. So that's really a cool thing. So let me see if there's any comments. So Burning Lemon, that was my relatively quick few minute answer to that question, but I enjoy it. And I'm still not perfect and I still have a lot to learn. So, and if I ever, if a few times I've been pointed out making mistakes on the blog, I'll look it up, and I still ask people all the time, native speakers and other people, just for information, just to double check. So, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to add up put in a follow up question. So cool. So what I want to do now is, I think we got through all of the questions and comments. So what I want to do is change directions, and let's see, we've done about half an hour. Maybe we'll do another half hour. We'll see how it goes. But what I want to do is talk about tenses, okay? Because this is the one thing I kind of had in mind, and I was mentioning this to somebody over email. So let me go back to my screen, and let me make sure you guys can all see it. Okay, cool. Looks good. So, what a big divider here. Excuse me. So let's talk about tenses, right? And when you hear tenses, dajare, by the way, dajare is like a pun, right? If you haven't heard that word before, and it's not always in kanji, but it can be. Dajare, and this is like a pun, word pun. And again, I'm getting off topic, but that's the way I work, right? So another word for this thing, tense, right, has two meanings, right? It can mean the tense like a past tense, and it can also mean like I'm tense, right? So another word for this is oyaji gyagu, right? Gyagu. Did I get that right? Yeah. So this is oyaji gyagu, right? And I got a comment. Okay, interesting. Yeah, yeah, dagashi. Yeah. So this there's another word that's called dagashi, which is basically a type of candy, which uses the same da. And this is actually the same dame, one from dame, which you probably, for dame means no good, right? No good or bad, etc. So these all have this da here, and this is the type of candy. I don't actually remember the details about that. But anyway, so getting back to this, and this I misspelled gyagu. Okay, so, and I'm just talking about the tense thing because it's an interesting detour. But oyaji literally means father, but it could also mean like an older man, middle age. I guess middle age is probably a better term, but not a young dude, right? Not a young guy. So gyagu here comes from English. It's a gairaigo. Again, that's a word if you don't know, you should definitely learn because I'll be using it a lot. This is a loan word, right? So for example, like baku, what's a better example of that? Baketsu, right? Which means buckets, like a pail, right? Gairaigo, right? So anyway, gyagu is definitely a loan word. Gairaigo comes from English, unless there's another language that has a similar word. It comes from gag. Of course, you say gag as a joke. So this is like a uncle gag or a middle-aged man gag. So the point is, it has a little bit of a bad nuance, right? And just like when you're saying a joke, especially a lot of the jokes I made, they're these cheesy jokes. Cheesy in Japanese would maybe be kusai, it means stinky, but it can also be cheesy. Anyway, so I'll try to stay, not do too much detours, but like I said, it's fun. So let's get back to tenses, okay? And tense in Japanese is jisei, okay? Which is jisei. And in terms of kanji, we have ji, which is, of course, toki. It's also from jikan. It means time. It's also when you're talking about time, like sanji, yoji, goji, rokuji. Like you're talking about the time, 3, 4, 5, 6 p.m. So that kind of makes sense. And this sei, I think it means control. It probably has other meanings. Seigyo is a word that means control. It uses the same sei. So controlling time kind of makes sense. So, and I'm just going to say grammatical tenses. Okay. So what are some tenses in Japanese? So just to take a step back, because to me, this is like a super important thing. Like really, like I said, grammar to me is the linchpin. It's the fundamental, one of the most important things about a foreign language or any language, right? And this is one of the most fundamental things of a language, the tenses. And the thing about Japanese is there's not a lot of tenses. It's relatively small amount. Now in English, you have things like the had, if I would have been, I should have been. It gets confusing, and I can't even explain those. And I learned a little Spanish a long time ago. It's pretty rough, so I won't be able to tell you much in Spanish, but I do remember that we had these books with a lot of tenses, and they were like pretty complicated. So you can definitely mention in the chat if you agree or disagree with the Spanish part, but it's definitely a lot of work. So the thing about Japanese, it's refreshing, and it's not just the tenses. There's other things, but the tenses for me are especially like much easier in English and probably more than Spanish from what I've seen. So it's really cool and it's easy, but you have to like make sure you get them down. And there's only a few. That's why I think this is going to be a good thing to to talk about. Just got another message. I want to make sure. Okay. I see. I agree that European languages have deep and complex grammar. Thanks for chiming in, Jim. Yeah, definitely. Their European languages are crazy. So, I mean, even the, I'm not going to go there, but, articles, the, and it's kind of crazy. Anyway, so we're talking about the tenses. So let's start with the basics, right? And I'm going to use suru, remember, is a verb to do, and it's a generic word that can be, like I said, I think a helping verb is probably the right term. Can be after things like benkyou suru, gakushu suru, right? It can be after a lot of words, so it's a good basic verb to use. The only fun thing about suru is that it's actually one of the few irregular verbs. But we'll still use it because it's super important. So let's just put numbers here so we can get these down. So non-past, right? Notice I didn't say present, and I might have said present earlier, which is kind of a misnomer. Now in English, right, we have, and I don't want to get too deep in English tenses because it's pretty deep, as you all know. But there's I will do, I do, I did do, I did. It gets pretty complicated. But in English, there's a little more clear present tense. In Japanese, like there's just this non-past, which could be present, and it could be future, right? And that's because really, and I'm going to say serves for future as well. All right, so let's give an example, right? So, excuse me, we have future stuff, and so all right, simple example, right? Benkyou suru yo, right? Ima kara, and I'll just do the uromaji for now, just in case. Ima kara benkyou suru yo, right? So I'm going to study starting now or from now, right? So this is more of a future tense, although it's kind of like borderline. A better example would be like ashita. What's an example? Chocolate o taberu yo. I'm using a different verb, but it should be okay. Ashita chocolate. I'll leave the romaji out for now unless anybody wants to chime in. Ashita chocolate o taberu. So this is clearly, in English you could say tomorrow I will eat chocolate, and the yo is like an emphatic exclamation point type thing, right? So, but these are the same tense. And now here's another one, right? Jutsu, and if you notice the kanji here, it's atama, head, and this is itai, pain, right? Jutsu, I'll just use furigan, we'll try this. Gatsuru. And I wrote an article on this a few years ago, but this gatsuru is kind of a special grammatical structure that's worth maybe another time focusing on. But for now, just this means I have a headache, right? I have a headache. So the point though is here the suru is clearly in the present tense, right? Whereas the chocolate o taberu yo, or ashita chocolate taberu yo, is clearly in the future. So here you would say like, I will do something. Whereas here, it's clearly in the present tense. So, and let me check. I think I just comment in. So we get a regular awesome. Spanish is like French, then wholly yes. It's variations of future, a past within the future, stuff like that. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's correct. Yeah, I don't know much French at all. But yeah, that's definitely sounds like a European languages. So thanks for chiming in. So, all right. So let's talk about more tenses. And I may come back to that tense if I want to point out something. So, shita, right? Let's say past. And this one is even simpler, right? And this is like something that happened, right? It happened, right? It could have been like recently or a long time ago. I mean, it's anything goes, right? Just like the future could be a second from now, a million years from now, right? Past could be a second ago, it could be a billion years in the past, right? So let's look at an example of that. So it would be like, so this is kino, which is yesterday. Kino, we'll use suru again. Ippai benkyou shita yo. So I'm using pretty simple, grammar, vocabulary words, even kanji here. Just for now, we can kind of ramp it up if people want to. So, kino ippai benkyou shita yo, right? Excuse me. So this is clearly the past. I studied a lot yesterday. There's different ways to phrase it. And notice I'm using casual forms here. I'm not using shimashita or anything. I could have just said kino ippai benkyou shimashita yo, which is using the desmas form. So ippai benkyou shita yo. So let's move on because that one's to me one of the simpler ones. So now we have one of the most complex te form or gerund or, and this is like does millions of things. But just say multi-purpose, right? So I want to give a few, and I got a nice little what's this called, outline form here. So let's view. Okay, so light command. Okay, ki o tsukete ne. Be careful. Right, again with the friendly, maybe a little feminine feeling there. Ki o tsukete ne. Right, light command, and then you have let's just say connecting. We'll just put it to you this way: temporal order temporal, temporal, ordo. All right, and also can be at the same time. So an example of that would be 食べて 飲んで 食べて飲んだ. So this sentence is a little awkward. It's specifically purposefully simplified just to give a point. But 食べて飲んだ, right? An example. Let me give you a better example. 食べて飲んだ. How about 歩いて行った? Right? I went via walking. And let's find another one. How about banana? Oh, yeah. I'm trying to find the simplest. Oh, 食べて. What's another example? リンゴを食べて. Alright, it's a stupid example, but you get the example. リンゴを食べて. そしたら寝た. Okay? The 寝た here is slept, went to sleep. So banana を食べて, リンゴを食べて, そして寝た. So here, you're probably not eating the banana and the ringo at the same time. So there's a little bit of temporal order. So they could be things that are the same, like in the aruite itta case, it's more like the things are more in the time period. It's not like I walked and then I went. It's more like I went as I was walking, or I walked there would be a natural English. But the point is it's temporal order. They're definitely not in reverse. So if you did A first, you would always say A, te form, and then B. You say A is always first or at the same time as B. Okay, so that's basically the way that works. And now, what are other things? So we have, let's see, we have special purpose endings, right? So let's give a few. Kudasai, chodai, which kind of means the same thing. Please, let's see, what else? Let's just use these as an example for now. There's a lot of other things. So we can have like a tabete kudasai, right? Please eat. Kore o tabete kudasai. Excuse me. Kore o tabete kudasai, right? So, and there's a lot, and then there's a whole thing with the te kureru, te morao, te itadaku, all these special things. This is kind of like a related category. So let's just say kore o tabete hoshii, right? And the one I just explained was kore o tabete moraitai, right? That kind of thing. So again, some of these are a little bit kind of made up examples, but I mean, you could use all these sentences. And the point is that's not really an order. It's not like a temporal order or anything. They're more tightly connected, right? Kore o tabete kudasai, right? And by the way, kudasai is a form of kudasaru, which is pretty similar to kureru. Kudasaru is a little bit more polite. And I believe kudasai is actually the command form, which we didn't get to yet, but it's the command form of kudasaru, which is kind of like this old style verb. But anyway, in these examples, and there's many, many more, we have this special word at the end, which kind of links using the te form, right? And let's see, is there any other? There's probably more, but let's move on to another tense because we don't necessarily have to do a comprehensive look at all these. And I just see a comment here from Jim. I love the phrase "kiyotsukete ne." It reminds me so much of living in Japan and people saying it to me all the time. That's great. Yeah, Japan is a great place. I haven't lived there, but you were lucky to have lived there. But yeah, it's definitely has a very friendly sense there. So let's move on to another form, Primas form. And there's probably a better, more formal way, but I like this form because it's this easiest to explain, and especially for beginning students, it's easy to understand. So you guys know the des mas, right? So if we go, right, des mas, for example, tabemas, right? So tabemas, you get rid of the mas and you get tabe, right? Shimas, you get shi, right? Anything like that. Arukimasu, you get aruki. Purposely put that in hiragana there. So this is the Primas form. So what does this mean? This one, and these are actually examples, but anyway, we can just use this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this so we can kind of organize it a little better. And these are just examples, right? So what are some of the meanings of the Primas form, right? So one of them is temporal order, literary feel, right? So that was a bad spelling of feel. So an example of this would be like, whatever. Kare wa unazuki dete itta no de aru. If you want to be extra literary with the dearu, which has a literary feel. But the point is here, unazuki, and unazuku is to nod. I do know the kanji, but I haven't unazuku. Okay, that's the kanji, but this is to nod, right? You're doing this type of thing, right? And I could have said, kare wa unazuite dete itta no de aru, right? That's totally fine, but this, using the Primas form, right? And because if you said unazukimasu, right, you get rid of the mas, you have unazuki, right? You have the temporal ordering type of thing. So he nodded, and again, in this case, it's not specified, so it sounds to me like it was right away. I mean, unazuku, nodding is a quick action, right? So it's not something that you're gonna like take, a half hour nodding and then move on, right? You're gonna nod and then immediately. So basically, he nodded, and then and this is a typo. There's a kanji misu, right? This should have said dete itta, right? And why is that? Remember, again, a little bit of sidebar here, but, right, I could say itta, which is went, right? Or I could say itta, which is said, right? And they both sound almost the same. I don't remember if the intonation is different on this one. I think it might be, but, and itta is actually the past of iku. So this is one of the other few, unfortunately, some of the few exceptions for verb conjugation in Japanese are some of the most common words. That's the way it goes, right? Like you, iku, and suru, but that's okay. There's not too many. There's like less than 10 that I can think of. So this is the past of iku, and this is the past of you, right? Which again is an exception because normally if you're pronouncing this, you would say iu, right? And I just saw a good comment I'll get to in a second. So comment from Regular, awesome. Thanks again for the comments. When you are introducing these forms, can you give a direct English example to compare to? Yeah, exactly. So if we were to go back up here, right? So example, this sentence here, I'm trying to see if I didn't give any examples here. So this is the non-past, I have a headache. And this is, we'll give this here. Tomorrow, I will eat chocolate. So kind of fill these in for clarity, right? And I'm just putting the will to emphasize, I don't actually need to italicize it, but the will is the key thing. It's talking about the future. And then we got to past. And this here, right, we said yesterday, I studied a lot, right? I guess studied, this is the past tense, right? So kiyotsukete ne is like, this one is a little tricky because the ne is almost impossible to capture in English completely. The best you can do is say, be careful, and you can do it with tone of voice, be careful, but it's hard to capture it exactly. If I just read this out of context, it looks a little bit harsher. So again, it's hard to convey, but be careful is this. So the one I did here was, okay, so let's translate this sentence since we're talking, right? I ate a banana, ate a apple, and then went to sleep. Or just slept sounds awkward, so I'll say went to sleep. There's a literally way to say went to sleep, like a netsuku, I think, if I remember, but often people just say neru neta, right? They just say neta. So the point here, and this is an interesting contrast, right, between Japanese conjugation of verb tenses in English. This is actually a really important point. Notice in the Japanese, or actually the English first, all of these verbs are conjugated for the tense throughout the sentence, right? I ate a banana, past. Ate an apple, past. Then went to sleep. They're all past. But in the Japanese sentence, right, we have tabete, which at this point, and that's the thing about the te form, it isn't really a tense in the sense of, it doesn't talk about time. It doesn't tell you if it's the past, future. It could be any of the above. It could be past, future, potential future, something you want to have. It could be anything. So at this point in the sentence, you don't know. And you could add some words at the beginning or have context, where you follow what's going on. But if I said, what did you do yesterday? Kino nani shita no? Right? You kind of understand that when they start speaking, oh, they must be talking about tense, past tense, because my question was about the past tense. What did they do yesterday? So you can know from context. But tabete, soshite neta. And by the way, soshite is just and. They just end. It doesn't have any deep meaning. It's just a then or end, right? So here, the tenses are all actually conjugated as past. Here, they're in the te form, except for the last one. Soshite neta, right? Nemashita. Slept, neru, right? Which is the last one is conjugated. So you have to look at the tense at the end. Similarly, and this is, again, it's a little bit off topic, but I want to just put this example here. I'll do this. We could say, same thing with the mas form, right? Banana o. Actually, I'll cut and paste, it'll be faster. If I cut and paste this guy here, nemashita, right? So notice, it's not just the tenses, but also the politeness form. In this case, we're moving from casual forms to keigo, right, or teinego, or desmascho, which is another way to call the desmas form. So here, we kind of upped the politeness to about a moderate level. Neta is just casual, basic, it's not rude, but it's not polite. Soshite nemashita, right? Anyway, again, slightly off topic, but my point is, you're not conjugating these for the mas form. Now, there is, and I wrote an article on this a few years ago, but there's occasionally, you'll hear mashite, right? Tabemashite, and it's extra polite. At least that's how it feels to me. It's extra polite. But in this case, most of the time, 99% of the time, you're not going to use mashite form in the middle. Like one example, one exception would be like, akemashite omedetou, like Happy New Year. But most of the time, you don't use those mashite forms. So anyway, so let's get back. And let's see here, again, we're having eat this, or please eat this, right? Okay, and this is, I want you to eat this. All right, and this example I can leave in. This is the same idea. And I think this number 3 is slightly unnatural. 2 sounds more natural. Anyway, same idea. I want you to eat this. Same idea. And then prima. So we had this here. Now this one is actually hard to translate because the literary feel, right? You can definitely express it in your voice if you're a rodokusha or a nareta, right? If you're an audiobook narrator. But I'll still translate it just briefly, right? Right? He nodded and then went out. Now it could depend on the if he's in a room or where is he? He's going out. That's what that literally says. But depending on the context, you could translate it differently. So again, the feel, the literary feel, frankly, it's not easy to translate. And I would say most of the time, just like the ne particle, you're not going to directly translate it. So there's some cases where you can have extra words. You can definitely have nuance. But here it's really hard to convey that. But like I said, unazuku and unazuite, each of those words, they have pretty much the same meaning in this context. It's just unazuki has a little bit of literary feel. And I don't think people would typically speak using this way. This would be, that's why I said it's a little literary feel. Anyway, so let's see if I missed any other comments. Okay, Luke, thanks for chiming in again. A friend asked me that. Nani ga komatteru? I didn't know that verb at the time. Okay, and I think this is it's a tricky verb. I did put, I had a post on this a while ago. But basically just to give a quick, and it's, again, we'll come back to the tenses in just a minute, but I want to be nice to the viewers here. Komaru, okay? So this one is basically when you are troubled. Again, this doesn't sound natural, right? Or in a fix, right? Or in a problematic situation. So again, none of these, like the fix, maybe it sounds okay, but these are not necessarily natural English phrases. You don't say I'm in a problematic situation, but that's really what komaru means, right? So an example is, let's say somebody's going to say something bad happened, right? And let's say you see your tires flat, right? I don't know, tire ga punkusareta or something, or something broke. Enpitsu no shin ga warechatta, orechatta, right? My pencil lead cracked or broke, right? So you could say komatta na. Right? And the na has a kind of a nuance of talking to yourself. Or you could see somebody else who has a problem and say, komatta ne. Like, oh yeah, you're in kind of a... And again, it's really hard to translate this word. But this is like... the way I like to think of it is this sucks. Now this is... komatta na is also... It's sort of a casual... it's definitely not a polite thing to say. You wouldn't necessarily tell your boss. You could say komarimashita ne. But... again, it's a negative term, but this is one way to translate it. Komatta na or komatta na in this case. This is technically a small a, but I have to scroll. We'll just leave it that way. Komatta na. So this is basically something bad happened, right? Or you could say komaru na, like if somebody's gonna do something bad to you. Like if somebody says, can I borrow like $100? Like 100 ドル貸してくれ, right? Komaru na. And there's another, and I had this post on this as well. So iwarete mo komaru, right? And I talked about the grammar of this in the boku ni part. I'm not going to go there, but the so iwaretemo is basically even if this is said to me, literally, right? Literally, I'm troubled. But this, so iwaretemo, like, you could translate this as like, I don't want to hear that. And again, this is not literally the same thing, but that's the feeling, right? If this is said to me, I'm troubled, right? It sounds horrible, but this conveys it a little bit. I don't want to hear that. そんなこと言われても困るんだけどな, right? That kind of thing. So, okay. So, Luke, hopefully that answered your question. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to the tenses stuff and try to at least cover the basic ones here. We're almost at an hour, but we could go a little bit over. That's okay. I don't have any immediate stuff after this. So, Primas form. So let's go to, let's see. Oh, there, command form. Okay. So, command form. And this is definitely a little harsh. Okay. And it can be, we'll just say harsh. It's definitely not something that you're going to want to say to your boss or even to a senpai, right? So, tabero, right? Or just use, we're talking about tsuru, right? So, shiro. What's an example? Shikkari shiro, which is like snap out of it, or let's find a better example. We'll use study again. Hayaku benkyou shiro, right? And this would be like, hurry up and study, which sounds a little weird in English. We could say, get studying or something. Get studying, right? Again, finding the perfect English is not always going to be immediately coming to me, but this is the idea. Quickly get studying. Like, hayaku benkyou shiro. So the shiro is a command form that has a pretty strong feeling of that, right? Tabero, right, would be eat. Kore o tabero, right? Kore o tabero, which is like eat this, right? Eat this. And again, English, frankly, it doesn't have this form. There's no command form that's, you can say eat, right? But that's the same as the dictionary form, right? That's if you're going to look up a word, the dictionary for eat, you would just look up eat, right? So here in English, it's just eat this, right? So the fact that there's no other words, it's just eat this, that itself, it does sound a little strong. And this is probably too exaggerated, but one exclamation point is probably enough. But kore o tabero, right? It's definitely there's a strong feeling to it, and this is a good form. And this is with the eru verbs. With the other types of verbs, which I forget what they're called, group 2 or the non-eru verbs, you would get like aruke, right? Aruke, like walk, or you would get, what's another example? Hashire. That one's even better. Hashire! Sounds like something you'd hear in an anime series. Hashire! Right? Run! Go! Dete ike! Get out. So those are basically some examples of this command form. And since we're doing this, actually I'll be consistent here. Hashire. Hashire. And this is like run! Again, English doesn't really have the words to express this command form. It's just run with an exclamation point in the tone of voice. So, all right, what other tenses? So, there's a lot of... one thing I just remembered as really important purpose of the Primas form. And we kind of... So, we can just say mas. Right, used with mas. Right, and this is kind of obvious because it's the Primas form, right? Tabemas. So that kind of goes without saying, or shimasu. But what's more important here is the compound verbs. And compound verbs are very common in Japanese. So we have, okay, I see another comment. I'll come right back to that. But compound verbs. So here, what's an example? Let's see. I just had one on the tip of my head. Oh, yeah, it's coming to my head. Tabe aruki. Yeah. Tabe aruki. I was going to put this one on Twitter the other day, but never got around to it. So this is literally eat, walk, right? Tabe aruki. So notice here, and that comes from, of course, taberu, the mas form, plus aruki, or aruku, which is to walk, the pre-mas form of both of these, right? So, and you can also have what's another example? If you could just say tabe aruku. I don't know if that word is too common. Another example would be like yarisu. How about yarimakuru? Makuru is a verb that means to do it like crazy. I think literally it means like to roll up or something, but makuru is a kind of a slang form that's like, let's do it like crazy, right? So notice here, this is actually a verb because we're adding a verb to the primas form of another verb, yari makuru. Yari makutteru, you could conjugate. And this here is actually a noun form because it's tabe aruki. So this is two primas forms glued together. So this is one way to another really common usage of the primas form. So I'm sure there's some others. Let's go check the comments. Where were we? Oh, okay. Jim is saying, when you do finish, if you have a Japanese joke, you could end on it. Okay. I'll think about the oyaji gyagu. That's cool though. Of course, even it's a very cheesy one. Okay, thanks, Jim. And then Luke is saying, tachinomiya. Tachinomiya. Okay, I haven't actually heard that word. That's not, okay, so let's take that word and look at it. It's a good example. And I think that's a place where you stand and drink. So it's just like a bar that you would stand at and drink at. I've never actually been to one of these, but I think I've seen them. So tachinomiya. So yeah, this is similar to the tabe aruki. Notice tatsu is to stand, right? A pretty common verb. Nomu is to drink. So this is the primas form of both of these, right? Tachinomiya. And ya here is typically used for like a store or a restaurant, that type of thing. Like fudosan ya would be a realtor. There's a lot of other words, maybe petto ya, or that's maybe petto shopu. But anyway, there's a lot of words, not everything, but a lot of words that have ya at the end. There's a lot of words that don't, like ginko, bank, that doesn't have a ya in it. But there's definitely a lot of words that have ya, which is like a word. And you could even have san if you want to be a little more polite, right? So you could say tachinomiya san for a little bit extra politeness there, formality there. So yeah, so that's another good example of two primas verbs stuck together. Right? And usually it's two. I don't know if you ever have three. There might be rare cases. I guess you could say, for example, if you wanted to find a contrived example, you could say tabe aruki makuru. It sounds a little unnatural, but you probably find somebody who uses that expression. Okay, so what other forms? So we have the ing form, right? But this is technically te iru, right? Actually, that's a better example to just call it this. Now this is technically, it uses the te form, but it uses, let's say ing form. So this uses the te form that we talked about in number 3, right? Just double check here. And then it also uses iru, which iru is the verb of existing, living things. It also can mean to need something, but that's a different iru, right? The iru we're talking about, it's usually written hiragana, but you can write it like this if you really want to, but it's usually not. So example would be simple, right? Or shite iru. Okay. Oh, just got a message. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so shite iru. So let's just, again, we're using benkyo, keep it simpler. And I want to close out in a little while. Don't want to overdo the first one, but we're getting some good questions here and some good feedback. So benkyo shite iru, right? And this is I am studying, right? So this is basically the active, right? This is like the ing form. I am studying. And since we're talking about the English, right? I am, and the I am, of course, in English we leave out subjects and objects and a lot of things, sometimes verbs, right? Here, if you're saying it, right, you could say boku wa benkyo shite iru. You could just say, if somebody asks you, "Nani shiten no?" right? You could say benkyo shite iru. You don't have to say boku wa benkyo shite iru or boku ga benkyo shite iru, right? That has a different nuance. So this has the implied I in this case. So another case is where this one I probably wrote in an article, but wrong ki ga ochite iru. Right? This one is sound a little weird because if you think in terms of English, right, and you map it to the ing form, which I think is technically in Japanese called the genzai shinko ke. That's a long word, but that's like the ing form. It literally means like current progression or something. You're in the middle of something. This is a different case. This is literally the tree is falling, right? And this is a good example. And there's others, but this is a really simple, easy to understand. Literally, it's a tree example. Sorry, the tree is falling. But that doesn't quite fit. It could mean the tree is actually going to hit you in the head. But depending on the context, it could actually mean the tree has fallen. Right? And now we get into English tenses. And I'm not even going to try to explain the has tense. But I think that's kind of the idea. It's a state. That's the point. Sorry, I get let me switch this up. Okay, we'll just go. What I'm going to do is move this down so we can see it on the screen at once. Okay, so this is expresses a state. Okay, expresses a state. I'm thinking about this dajare in the back of my mind here. Okay, okay, so expresses a state. Cool. So I think we've been a little over an hour, and I'm really happy that a lot of you, a few of you, I guess, have stayed with the stream to the end, which is awesome, and I'm really happy. So I want to end out with the dajare, the oyaji gyagu, at the request of Jim, and this is what I was just thinking about today. So I live in Oregon, and it just snowed today, which is pretty rare, relatively rare, and it reminded me of a certain Japanese joke, which I actually heard in a Japanese drama, which I think was called Last Christmas, if I remember correct, which is actually pretty good. But anyway, the joke was the guy sees the snow and he says something like "samui snow." So when you hear that, you may be like, "What?" So let's look at that. All right, samui. Right. So if I were to write it out, I could write it here. Is that showing? Oh, there's a delay. Right. Samui snow. Samui snow. Okay, so you're like, what's going on here? So basically, this would be like the regular way to say this. Samui desu no. I mean, no is a little feminine. You could just say samui desu, right? It's cold. But samui desu no, that sounds a little feminine. But, and there's actually some dialects where you might say no at the end, or you might lengthen the end of the sentence. I think they call it the gobi. You would kind of lengthen that. But also, there's a kind of a rough way of saying des, which I think is more like by maybe, I don't know, college student, teenage boys type thing. That's the nuance I get. But it's samui sne, right? Samui sne, you know, makes me think of like some college student guy. That's just the way of speaking this. I mean, you could say samui desne or samui sne, and there's other words you can say that with. This is just one example. But anyway, the point is, you end up saying samui snow, and you're like, what's the point of all this? Well, the point is snow, of course, right? Snow in Japanese typically is yuki, right? We'll just look at the kanji, which is here, right? But in this case, we're saying samui snow, but the snow sounds like snow. So you're like, ha ha ha. So again, I'm not expecting anybody to roar out laughter. And in this drama, and I forgot the guy's name, I remember his face, but he said all these dajares, right? At least a few times. And it was one of the few things I've seen where there's a character, and there's probably other characters like that. But anyway, he would spout off a few different dajare, and some of them I got, some of them I didn't get. This was over 15 years or 10 years. I saw it 10 years ago. But anyway, so samui snow, you can say it next time you see something cool. And I'm glad you like it, Jim, and I see some laughter here. So I think we'll close it out. But thanks again, guys and ladies. So like I said, if you can please give me feedback, you can put it in the chat here. You can send me emails. I may do, my voice is getting raw now. I may do another session next week around the same time, and I may invite whatever, the Twitter follower people. We'll see. I'm not sure, but that's my tentative plan. So thanks, and I see right on. Okay, from Jim, great seeing brilliant final work. Okay, awesome. Yeah, we get some special guests here, which is always cool. So let me see if I can get my closeout music working. And what was I going to do? I was going to do this, and I know I'm talking about loud here, but I was going to pull this up, and then where's the music? Is the music not working? Oh yeah. So I was going to do this. Bye-bye. See you next time.